So what are we here to do today, boys?
We are going to cast some commons.
Yeah. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special episode of Battlechads. I am Josh, and I'm joined with two very special guests from the Pauper community, Teasdale and Rhys. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
So this episode, we're going to talk everything Pauper. We're going to go into the bit of the history of it. We're going to talk about into the format itself, why you should play it, and why it's just all around a great format. And I couldn't think who better to invite than arguably if not one of, I'd say UK's biggest Pauper content creators, but honestly, like probably two of the biggest Pauper content creators in the actual Pauper space at the moment. So I sent the invite out to the Casting Commons podcast, and they said, "Yeah, let's do it. We'll have a little collab." So we've got Teasdale and Rhys with us. Lads, do you just want to introduce yourselves? We'll start with you, Teasdale.
Yeah, hi, I'm Teasdale. I am one of the hosts of Casting Commons, obviously the greatest Pauper podcast. And obviously I make a YouTube channel as well, where I do gameplay purely on Pauper and brews as well. That's Teasdale MTG as well. You can check that out.
Yes, I'm less exciting than Teasdale because I don't do any of that. I just co-host the podcast and basically tell him his ideas on brews are really bad.
That's yeah.
Yeah, you are quite a massive brewer. You're always at it. Teasdale. Obviously on the group chat we've got, like you're always posting all kinds of stuff, and I'm looking at. I'm like, what am I looking at? I don't even know what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I do try. I definitely try to do all sorts of things. I've done a few recently where I've like started and then I've got halfway through and realised that half of these cards aren't even on Magic Online. So that's always a good one.
Yeah, it's a nightmare, especially with all these like special products that are coming out, the extended universes and the supplementary products they're doing. With the Fallout stuff, it was an absolute nightmare to balance it online and then on paper. We've seen that in the Legacy community as well. But Pauper then itself, so it's a well-known format, but for those, I always say people living under a rock, but for those living under a rock, what is Pauper? Like, what is it?
Do you want me to take this one, Rhys?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so roughly it's a format that you can only play cards that are common legal. It started back way beyond, there's a bit of conflict in information, but I think it started officially like 2008, where it was like a Magic Online format. And it was only cards that were common rarity on Magic Online that caused a lot of disparity. Like things like Curd Ape and things like that weren't common. But then it got really popular, got played in paper, which is slightly relevant with what we'll talk about later. But basically there was a different ban list different rarity list for paper and Magic Online. So that kind of meant that cards were legal in paper, and you had paper Pauper, and then you had online Pauper, which had different decks, different lists. That's why you would have seen back in the day, you would have seen cards in like events from like Rags to Riches, where you'd see like High Tide and stuff like that. But it was never playable on Magic Online because it was never common rarity. So, and then eventually that kind of got unified. I think it was like I actually can't even remember. It was quite not that long ago, right? 2018, which I guess is actually quite long ago. It's 7 years ago now. And then that got unified. So then it was anything that was common printing, Magic Online or paper, not Arena. But yeah, so that meant that cards like Chain's Edict, Battle Screech were then now legal in paper Pauper.
Mm-hmm.
And they've also I believe you corrected me one time on the podcast, right, that they've started to Gavin's tried to implement that to get that disparity. They've printed Battle Screech since then in paper.
Yeah,
as a common
view where they've basically tried to look at what was printed as a common on Magic Online, but not yet in paper, and they're trying to print them as commons in paper, so there's like no like weirdness. Because Chain's Edict for age, well, I don't know if Chain's Edict has been reprinted as a common now, I think, but for ages it was uncommon, but it was legal in Pauper, but basically only because it was common on Magic Online. But yeah, Gavin's basically went out of his way to try and make sure that eventually stops, so everything that is legal in Pauper is paper legal in Pauper as well.
But that unification came with some bans, right? I think when they unified it, they banned like him, High Tide, etc., and a couple of other things like that, and Sinkhole as well. So then that sort of bridged the gap. So
it makes me think about certain things, because there's like certain experiences within Pauper, like we just mentioned, where you've got this disparity between like online and paper and stuff. But there's positive experience that Pauper players have as well in terms of downshift. Now, it's something that we like, obviously, like if you're modern standard legacy players, like you don't really care so much about the rarity of cards unless it's affecting prices. But with Pauper, like there's a massive. Every time a card is printed into common, it's like big, exciting, like brew space opens. Like how does this affect the format? You know, how does it change the format? Obviously, Magic's getting more and more powerful as the years go on. So like a lot of downshifts now, especially from like even up to from Mythic. You know, we've had Mythic downshifts and even rare downshifts. It's almost a unique experience to Pauper, and if you get into that format, it opens up a new sort of like. If you've never experienced that Pauper as a format itself, it opens up a new sort of avenue to enjoy Magic too.
It was quite a cool one as well, with the downshifts. Although we don't really have like Modern Masters sets anymore, or like reprint sets that often.
Mm-hmm.
But it was because of downshifts happening in those sets, it made those sets relevant to the actual format rather than like for modern, you buy Modern Masters just essentially to get the cards.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't change the format. Whereas with Pauper, like a Modern Masters set that doesn't add any new cards can still change and influence the format, which was quite cool. It sometimes still happens with Commander sets. For some reason, like Commander decks have rarities, even though everything's a one-of. And again, for some reason, they decide to change those rarities sometimes. So we get some random weird downshifts from like Commander Precon decks that sometimes shake up the format as well.
Because I think that. Oh, sorry.
No, crack on.
I was just going to say, I think they have. I think Go for the Throat was a big example, right? They added Go for the Throat to the format by downshifting it in like one of the Commander Precons. And they did state that, I think Gavin said that they're going to try and not do that now, moving forward, but it still can happen for sure.
That's sort of what unites the sort of like, because I see Pauper as very much an eternal format, you know, along with Legacy and all those other sort of non-rotating sort of formats. And you know, that the effects of, you know, Commander sets, the effects of, you know, supplementary products and stuff can have a massive impact on Pauper, and can, you know, you've seen in the past, you know, when you've seen the bans and stuff, how it's almost negatively and positively affected the format. So it's almost not unique in the fact that, you know, you can play Pauper and escape this horrible attitude, I guess what you want to call it, that Wizards have towards printing cards and sort of milking the player base. But the thankfully thing with Pauper is that, you know, your card, instead of being like 20-30 pound a card, is going to be like 20-30p a card.
Yeah. I guess there's like a few spurs to run off there. One of the main ones is like the distaste for Modern Horizon sets, which I feel like most formats are feeling now. Like they're getting these sets that change, like one set changes the entire format.
Yeah.
And Pauper doesn't escape that. It's not affected as much as, say, Modern or Legacy. Like Modern Horizons 2 Elementals, for example, completely changed those two formats beyond recognition.
Yep.
Pauper doesn't get affected to that extent, but quite often it'll get a new card that makes a new deck, then that deck's basically busted. But the sort of flip side of that is, because Pauper's run by a committee and not by Wizards, they do tend to action a lot faster on bans than Wizards. One of the best examples, to be honest, is Modern Horizons 3, Cranial Ram, which I guess most modern players won't even look twice at. But it's essentially red-black for a cranial plating that has living weapon. Cranial plating is already banned in Pauper, and all that glitters, which is like an enchantment cranial plating, essentially is also banned.
Yep.
So they seen this card be printed as common. Well, before it was printed, they seen the spoiler that it was going to be printed as common, and pre-banned it, which is something that I don't think I've seen for any other format.
No, I don't think I've ever seen that ever.
I believe the only other card ever to be pre-banned was Luttery in EDH,
and
right?
Commander, yeah.
In Commander, that is literally the only other card. So for a competitive format like, well, 1v1 format like Pauper, that's to be fair, I think that's incredible to do.
Yeah, so we talked about quite a lot of the. I mean, I do want to delve into the Pauper format panel more because as a legacy player myself, and you two lads have delved into legacy in the past. It's something that a lot of other formats are wondering, well, why don't we have this? We saw the. I guess it's different in sort of the commander panel, whatever they were called. With the decisions they made and the effects that they had on their community. But I think when it comes to 1v1 stuff, having a sort of panel, especially people who are passionate, because obviously Pauper's got Gavin Verhey in it, who are very passionate about the format. There's a lot of cons to it, I believe, but there's also a massive pushback to sort of that sort of relationship between people running the format and the format itself. But before we move on to the PFP, I want to talk about. So we've there's lots of reasons why we should play Pauper, and we've covered a few of them. Then we covered the cost. Obviously, it's cheap. The experiences, the very unique experiences to the format. The play patterns, etc. Traditionally, I don't know if you guys would agree with this. Pauper, when I first started playing Pauper, it was a very grindy format in terms of you could have a lot of. You have a lot of magic for your money. Essentially, you buy a deck for like £30-40 max, and then you get a lot of magic with that. Is that still the case then? Would you say that Pauper's still as grindy as it was, or would you say it's moved on a bit of that in light of the sort of MH, all that stuff?
I would personally say previously, up until the bans, I would say the format definitely sped up. 100 fold, 10-fold, whatever you want to say. Like literally, your average time was like 4 to 6 or something. Recently, with the changes to the format, I would tend to agree. You're definitely getting the controls back. The grind is still there. You still have little. I would say you get little glimpses of speed. Because combos have got better over time. Combos have got more efficient over time. Your aggro's still still good. So yeah, you're still getting them short games, but generally there is a lot, I would say, leaning towards a lot more mid-range to control nowadays, especially with the bans and unbans.
Yeah, I think it's something Pauper does tend to experience over like its life cycle. It'll have a lot of peaks and troughs where it speeds up a lot. Something changes, like it gets banned or new cards are printed, and then it slows back down again. It always does seem to tend to go slower again. Like Teasdale's saying, like before the bans, it was particularly fast with the Glee combo deck and Kuldotha being two of the best decks. But then previous to MH3, I would have said it was a lot slower. Like once MH3 come out, it like spiked again. And then same like previous when ATOG and Disciple were legal for Affinity, like the format was a lot faster then as well. And then they got banned and it slowed back down. So it always does tend to like slow down into a more mid-rangey format, but there is definitely periods where it is quite fast as well.
So you have those experiences with these play patterns with Pauper that are quite unique. I'd suggest, or I'd say anyway. But the thing, another drive I think is really great about this format is because the decks are so accessible, the decks are so cheap. You can have someone who can essentially. It's so easy to build like a battle box of decks. So you've got a library of decks you can bring to F&M or bring to whatever night you play Pauper night or whatever, and then you can sort of like give a community member a deck and be like, hey, do you want to try this format? It's really cheap. So it's a really easy way to build up a community using the format. And it's something that you have worked hard on recently in the west coast of England. You've used Pauper quite heavily to build a community there, and your F&Ms are now, you're getting double numbers for F&Ms, Pauper F&Ms, right?
Yeah, we do tend to get quite up there now. It's pretty good. It's for a small community that doesn't have an LGS. We're not rivaling cities, but we're sort of getting on par with them sometimes, which is quite cool. But yeah, like you said, for the paper side of things, it's so easy to build decks. Firstly, everyone's just willing to give you spare cards because none of the cards are really worth anything for the most part. But then also you can literally just go on like Troll Trader or Card Market or whatever and just buy a full deck. And quite often the postage will cost more than the cards you're buying, which is quite funny.
I think you actually did it once, didn't you? Where you did was it one of your? I think because you do like a league, don't you? Where it's like you do so many F&Ms in a month, and then the sort of winner of overall the F&Ms will then get free entry into the end of monthly, and then you actually did a deck giveaway, didn't you? So what part of the prize support was a whole deck?
Yeah, so that was it wasn't for the winner, but basically if you attended one of the league nights, you got put in a raffle. And whoever won the raffle got a full Bogles deck, like
Brilliant.
full like complete competitive Bogles deck. Like there was no like changes to cards to put cheaper cards in, but like the full deck was maybe 25 quid. But
Brilliant.
it's a cool prize to win.
Yeah,
Especially if you're like playing some like a different deck, to win a whole new deck that you can then just take to the next event and play. Is pretty sick.
and I think the one more thing I want to talk about, and so why people should try Pauper and why should play Pauper, and at Teasdale will be a massive advocate of this, is the brew space. You know, a lot of you look at like the sort of casual community around Commander and such, you know, a lot of the drive to play Magic is for people to put their own spins on a deck, to come up with a deck themselves, or even to, you know, play with cards that they would never normally have played with. But you can do that in Pauper. I know, Teasdale, you've been working quite a lot of brews, and obviously to the Rhys giving you a bit of his opinion. I was going to say a swear word then, but we're not allowed to swear on this podcast. So.
Yeah, Rhys often, let's just say Rhys often puts me back down to earth in a lot of respects. But yeah, I think the main thing for me for Pauper is, and it's one thing definitely I've loved, is definitely the brew space for Pauper for sure. It's it's not only a deck that's, you know, established or competitive, and you can put your own spin on it. Like, I like this card for this, I like this card for that. You can do that, but then because like, say, for most cases, like the aggro creatures are quite underpowered compared to the likes of Modern and Legacy, etc. You usually do get a turn or two extra than like what a normal aggro deck would get in other formats. That gives you that extra room to literally just brew whatever you want. Like I've brewed, my channel generally is mainly brews. Like 90% of them are all off the cuff brews that I just sit, usually while I'm on the toilet, right, gathering and all that sort of stuff. So ideas will come to my head, and you know, the wife will be sitting watching telly. I'm like, right, I need to run upstairs because I need to build this deck on Magic Online because that's how I see things.
Yeah.
And it's like, right, I need to brew this deck. Like, I'll walk around the house and Magic Online will be open just in case I get an idea, and it'll be bad, it'll be terrible, but it's generally like what happens because the brew space is so open. You can put your own spin on combos, like, because there's, for example, a deck that exists now because of the unbans, again, is Flickertron. Flickertron, for example, has a 9 or 10 card infinite combo, which involves unwinding and flickering mnemonic walls. It's like a massive combo. It's convoluted as hell, right? It doesn't normally win like that, ever, but it has access to that because the format is like that. You can basically play these wacky combos that are four card combos, 5 card combos, and still be fine. It definitely, obviously, as Rhys alluded to earlier, has peaks and troughs. Like in the peak of Modern Horizons 3, for example, where the format's really small, that brew space obviously goes down because you have less turns to do what you want.
Yeah.
But the slower the format, the more you get to put your own spin on things, and you know, you can still play brew control decks. Like I've brewed green-red control because initiative was so good and all the initiatives was really bad. All the initiatives have just been banned at that point. I've played, I don't even know what I've played. Pili-Pala combo, another deck that was, which is quite ironic because a lot of people are trying to find a 2-card combo that's replacing Glee right now, and a lot of people are playing that at the moment. So there's like a lot of different things where you can put your own spin on a lot of things, and there's a lot of brewing space for sure.
Especially with the size of the card pool, because it is an eternal format. You know, you've got cards from the beginning of time in terms of Magic anyway, that are in the format. So you know, you've got tens of thousands of cards you can probably pick from, and the, you know, it's almost like the world's your oyster in terms of being a brewer. But from like a, I mean, I'm not a brewer at all. I've got the mental capacity for that, but I do like putting my own spin on decks for sure. And when I've come to sort of like to a format like Pauper, it's like there's so many options. Like there's so many, and it rewards you to knowing what you want to do, what your game plan wants to be, and also rewards you if you identify what meta you want to beat, because you've got a lot of tools you can bring to the format, just like you can with like say Legacy and that. But yeah, I noticed like with Pauper 2, there's usually like an engine in the card. Obviously before the bans, you had the what was the black card that you sacrifice something and you draw.
Deadly Dispute.
Yeah, so like Deadly Dispute was like an engine itself that you could build around, and there's lots of Deadly Dispute decks. Obviously that card's gone from the format now, but I found Pauper, there is that sort of, there's this engine, this little bit of a deck I can build off, and it's almost like a seed of a deck. I'd be like, boom, here's a deck now. But yeah.
Cleansing Wildfire is a pretty good example of that.
Yes, actually, yeah, that is true.
A 2-mana destroy a land, search for a basic, and then you draw a card, so it's a cantrip as well. But rather than using it as disruption, you can target your own indestructible land. So it's essentially a rampant growth that draws a card.
Mm-hmm.
But there's like Jund Cleansing Wildfire decks, there's Red Black Cleansing Wildfire decks, there's Jeskai Cleansing Wildfire decks. And all basically just playing this card, playing indestructible artifact tap bans from MH2, I think they were from.
Yeah.
And like that as the core, and then you just build around that core, because you're a control deck that can ramp and cantrip.
Mm-hmm. And fix your mana.
Yeah, and fix your mana.
Cool. So that's sort of like why we should play Pauper. I don't know if you lads want to add anything to that before we move on, because I want to talk about the PFP next, if that's all right with you. Anything to add on? It's
worth Teasdale mentioning playing Pauper on Magic Online as well. I dabble playing it on Magic Online, but he obviously plays it a lot more on Magic Online in terms of like cost to play it on Magic Online as well.
Yeah, I think the thing with Magic Online, it's so cheap. It's like, you think it's cheap in paper, it's like next level cheap on Magic Online. Especially like you have certain cards that are pricey, that are probably more pricey in paper, and in most cases it's sideboard cards, but they are also similarly expensive in paper. Like like Dust to Dust, for example. Yeah, Bebs, Hydroblasts, the usual, that sort of thing. But then after that, like, cards are so cheap. Like I actually can't even remember when I'd ever spent a tick for the most part, like release comes out and I literally just select common, new set, click, right along, get a play set of basically every common I could even think of. Like half the time, if I'm sharing my screen with Rhys at some point, he's like, "Why have you even bought that?" I was like, "You never know, it could be good." And wouldn't even cost like 0.1 of a tick for everything, because everything's like 0.0004 of a tick. So like, once you've got your collection of sideboard cards, or them cards that are slightly expensive, or even if you rent those, everything else is dirt cheap. Like, you would go to a deck and there'll be 3 playsets of cards maybe best that are expensive. I say expensive for Pauper or Magic Online if you're trying to run the cheap, and then after that it's absolute pittance.
You just win, just do 2 5-0s and then crack your chest and then get that price back. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, essentially, like even like Blue Elemental Blasts and stuff, they're like 4 ticks each.
Yeah.
Like, they're not expensive in the grand scheme of things. They're just expensive in comparison.
Yeah.
So once you've paid $10 and got a set of Blue Elemental Blast or Hydroblast, that's all your blue decks now are like pittance. I remember Teasdale saying once that he basically got a free rental account and rented a full deck on the free rental account because it was that cheap.
Well, there was a video that I was toying with, but I realised actually it was quite flooded. A lot of people had done this, where they try to basically get a free account, get a free rental account, which gives you, I think, 5 ticks or something along the lines, or 3 ticks or whatever it is. And you can do that with like 2 accounts, like 2 different websites. So that gave you like 8 ticks or 6 ticks or whatever, or 10 ticks or whatever. And basically from there, they were like, right, from that, how do you generate playing events? And that was like going infinite sort of thing, was the attempt from zero money. And it was like, you get free stuff from Magic Online. After that, you try to avoid that to a play points, and then you play a league for free. And then that sort of stems you into it. And there's a lot of videos on that. Like, it's pretty easy to, like, I would say it's very easy to do. For sure.
So the PFP then is something that is currently unique to Pauper itself. which is a Pauper format panel. Obviously, it was. I'm not sure if it was the brainchild of Gavin Verhey, but he is essentially the main man. Obviously, people who know who he is. He's got very passionate about the format, very invested in the format, and you have this sort of panel who decide the bans, unbans, how Pauper looks essentially, and by and large, it's been quite a positive experience for the format. I mean, I know there's been disagreements in the past, bans and unbans, how it's ran, why aren't you banning this card quicker? I know that I saw a lot of discourse on that around Swift Spear, for example. Why is this card still in the format? It's been too long. Similarly, you see that sort of thing in from Wizards in Legacy, with Grief, with Blue Black Reanimator, etc. But you guys will know, have a more of experience in this because you're way more enfranchised in this format than I am. But how do you look at the Pauper format panel? Is it a good thing, bad thing? Would you change it? Like, what's your thoughts on it?
I think for me, it's a major positive to the format. There's not only Pauper that runs like this, but Dual Commander also runs by a panel.
Mm-hmm.
And both the formats seem to be like some of the most balanced formats, but also some of the most active on communication and like banning restricting cards.
Yeah.
To keep the formats balanced. One thing, like Legacy used to be my format forever. Like I always played Legacy. It was basically the only thing I used to play. We used to go to GPs just to play Legacy side events at the GPs. And then like played in Eternal Weekends and all sorts like this. But Legacy sort of died off for me and lost interest because Wizards basically just abandoned it. And they just left it to rot. Like when cards were way too good for the format, they just left them and they were there forever. And it just made the format feel really still, which Pauper could be faster. But the speed in which it is allows them to, I think, make better decisions on the bannings, like make the correct decisions. But even still, with all that thinking, they're still much faster than WotC, basically.
Yeah. Which
is the biggest benefit.
I think, to me, the two things, like, obviously it is a net positive, I would say, like, it's a no-brainer for me. I think the big thing that, as Rhys said, that could be faster, but then, for example, with the Swift Spear ban, or even the Glee ban is another one, or the Glee deck ban, is basically that they kind of want, as you said, they kind of want the data to make the correct decision, or the correct time for that decision as well, which I think is also good. They do take like the Cranial Ram pre-ban.
You can't ask them to be any faster on that one.
Yeah, no, you can't take. But on the flip side, the main pull for pre-ban and that was, Pauper was 5 or 6 days after the release of Modern Horizons 3. So they said it. I think they said in like their video or their write up that if Pauper was not there, which is the biggest flagship Pauper event of the years, like all three of them are the biggest events, that they probably would have left it for at least a month just to see.
Yeah.
Because why not? There's no harm in leaving it because they have the ability to just be right, it's banned.
Yeah.
Just like that. So I think it's a net positive. I do think they definitely could improve on things, but no one's perfect. They're all really good as well. Because Pauper's not a bigger pool of people compared to like other formats. They are very approachable, and we've had a few of them on. I talk to quite a lot of them semi-regularly.
I think that's one thing you see from them as well is a lot of them play Pauper or visibly play Pauper quite often. Like Hyson and Weber, we see loads of times in like challenges, either playing brews or like playing top decks. Paige just basically destroyed a Yank event, and was it the New York Open or whatever it was called?
The Upstate New York Pauper
Upstate
Open.
New York Open. Basically just took glee and like I don't know if they lost the game, like they just destroyed this event. Yeah, it's really cool to see the people that are in charge actually like playing the format or writing about the format or making content on the format.
It adds a lot of credibility, I think, as well. You know,
Yeah.
someone like that who, you know, winning events, playing events, you constantly see them. There's constantly a presence there. It just adds credibility to what they're saying. Because if you looked at, you know, I know you said then, you know, the Pauper Forum panel are getting the data behind them to ban. If you look at the way Watsy's doing, particularly, you know, we talked about Legacy before, because I'm still very much into Legacy. The way they've been, if you look at the last BNR, which we're going to talk about in a bit, actually, if you look at the last BNR and turn to Legacy, they actually banned on vibe rather than actual stats, because the actual Legacy format on paper is actually quite balanced. So it was like one of the rare times I actually saw where they've actually banned on vibe, and that's from Wizards. So you get these essentially players who've come together, created this community-driven, or not community-driven, but community-driven sort of panel, like actually making better decisions than the actual flagship person who's actually, you know, the company who's actually making all the profits from people playing and buying Magic. So it's quite interesting, I think.
I think with, like, on the Legacy aspect, though, although it possibly would work for Legacy and it would possibly be, like, a really good thing for the format, there's that outside chance that what would happen would be the same as what happened to the Commander committee, because some cards in Legacy have, like, ridiculous value. If you're turning up one day, logging on to see what the bans are, and you've just lost 500 quid plus, you're not going to be very happy. And that's essentially what happened to the Commander one. The banned two really expensive cards, and then one card that everyone said should be banned. So then all the Commander players that have these, especially Mana Crypt, have it in every deck.
And it can only be played there as well.
Copies.
Like, it can't be played anywhere else.
You can play it in Vintage or Commander.
Yeah.
You've got 5 copies. They're like all 100 quid each, and now they're all 30 quid each. Like, you're going to piss a lot of people off.
Yeah.
Where that could happen in Legacy as well. But it doesn't. It's not really applicable to Pauper because all the cards are really cheap. Like, you're not. Even if you ban something that people don't want banned, you're not costing those people loads of money.
It's that safety net there, but also freedom to make these decisions. Like, this is a problem; it has to go. We're not gonna skin a 20-year-old Jason who's just come out of university and now he's
exactly.
You know, he's got these cards that are now worth nothing. So that's sort of good in that thing. I mean, to me personally, I think that the format panel in Legacy would be a overall good thing, because Legacy is now just a community format. It just is. Like, there's no pathway with it, you know, like Pauper currently. I think Pauper's getting way more opportunities to compete. You know, we'll talk about that in a bit. You know, there's lots of opportunities, particularly in the UK now, to compete within Pauper, you know, qualify for stuff, you know, get mental prizes and stuff, but it's all still community-driven initiatives, which, like we said before, it's a really good format to get those initiatives going because of how cheap it is now, how you can create this collective.
There is a pathway with Pauper, though, to the Pro Tour. You can play Pauper and qualify for the
Oh,
PT.
can you?
Yeah, on Magic Online.
Oh, sweet. Well, there you go. Boom. Nice.
I'm not sure that they might do it for Legacy as well. I'm not 100%, but there's definitely Magic Online events that you can play in Pauper and then qualify for the PT.
Are they the showcase qualifier sort of things?
I think so. Or the qualifiers in particular. I can't remember what they are in particular. Like the exact event. There's that many events.
Yeah.
We could find out for sure, but I think it's mainly the Pauper qualifiers, right?
I mean, I honestly, I play a lot of Magic Online, and I only play Magic Online for paper, really. Like, as my whole like, I guess, incentive to play Magic Online is just to see what I can bring in paper. But anyway, I digress. So, you know, the PFP, they're responsible for the bans and restrictions, not bans, restrictions, but BNR announcements and stuff. And do they follow a, you know, they have like a schedule, like what's he do? They follow that schedule. So if there's a problem, like an emergency ban, and that's within their remit to do that.
Yeah.
Another reason to play
tend
Pauper.
to line up. Yeah, they do tend to line up with WotC if there's like no emergency or if there's no changes, they'll like tag onto it. But yeah, if something's urgent and needs done, they'll just do it.
Yeah. I wish there was like another formats, that's for sure. Modern would have benefited from that.
I think, to me, that going back to the obviously the Legacy versus Pauper sort of panel, I think the one big driving factor, which a lot of people probably maybe overlook or take for granted, is the fact that Gavin is generally so invested in Pauper naturally. Like, it was his brainchild. Literally, he was like, "I want a panel to run to make this format the best it can be." You would need that in Wizards.
Yeah.
So I don't know enough people in Wizards to basically like, that person is the brainchild to make the legacy panel, because I imagine Gavin does a lot of, like, a lot of people have a lot of different opinions. If you play Pauper once a month, if you play Pauper every single day on leagues, if you play in challenges, all of those will give you a different opinion on what you think needs to go.
Yeah. I think it is key what you said there. Like Legacy, I believe I believe they have like format specialists at Wizards, but clearly they don't listen to the Legacy one enough. But they don't have that Gavin Verhey, and I had this conversation with Will Hall actually, because Will's massively into Pauper, and I said, like, cause he also plays Legacy as well. I was like, do you reckon Legacy would benefit from Pauper format panel? And he's like, it would. However, Legacy doesn't have Gavin Verhey. Pauper does, and that's the key for it, really. Yeah. I don't think a format panel will work for like standard, modern, Pioneer, what even is that format. But things like that, because there's they're on the RCQ system and RCQ pathways and all that. I don't think it would work for them, but particularly the community panel things, 1v1 commander especially. Look at that as a case study. I'm not sure they have a Gavin Verhey, but they have passionate people. So if you look at 1v1 commander as a case study, then I don't see why the format panel wouldn't work for Legacy. But they're responsible for the B&Rs, and you had really interesting B&Rs in Pauper. It almost is akin to the December bannings and unbannings in Modern. That sort of level of impact on the format. So do you just want to just tell me what was banned and what was unbanned? Because it was 3 major bans from like 3 major archetypes in the format, wasn't it?
Yeah. So the first 2 I'll cover. I'll leave one for Rhys. I don't know why. It feels wrong for me to say this one out loud.
I wonder which one.
So the first one, which was fairly obvious, is Baskin Brood Scale went. I actually had to think then which one got banned, but basically Baskin Brood Scale, which people have probably seen if you've been on this pod before for Modern. Obviously that combos with Blade of the Blood Chief.
Yeah,
is that the name of the card?
That's right. Yeah.
See, look at me. I know cards that are rares, guys. But in Pauper, it combos with a card from, I think it's like Torment or Odyssey, called Sadistically, which is an enchantment, sort of equivalent of when a creature dies, put a counter on the enchanted creature. And Brood Scale, obviously, when it gets a counter, it makes an 0/1 spawn that you can sack to add a mana, and then which that makes it die and rinse and repeat. So you make an infinitely large guy, while also having infinite colourless, with a card like Energy Refractor, which wasn't always mainstay, can make infinite coloured mana, and then you can win the game with various things. You have an infinite power guy you can attack. You have Nadia's Nightblade. That was a 2-card combo, but one was 2 and one was 1 mana. So it was a 3 mana in total combo, plus a card need to die, which could either be a spawn or its own adaptability. The other one, which was sort of, I wouldn't say surprised, because it probably needed to go, was Deadly Dispute, which is 1 and a black for an instant that sack an artifact or creature as an additional cost to cast it, and draw 2, create a treasure. This sort of effect's been around in Pauper for a long time. In the most recent times, right? Costly Plunder was the first one, and Perilous Research was before that, which sort of seen play. But this sort of took it to the next level of obviously only costing effectively 1 because you got 1 mana back. But it's sort of like every deck needed to be a reason to not run Deadly Dispute. It was just the best draw spell. In it kind of, once people had realised, because I think there was a gap between Deadly Dispute being printed and actually implemented in play. But once we got to that gap, like everybody was like, black's the best colour to draw cards. And it sort of like shifted from
it just became like super ubiquitous in like most decks in the format. Like loads of decks would just add black to play Deadly Dispute and Ica Wellspring. Because Ica Wellspring is a 2-mana artifact that draws a card when it enters and draws a card when it dies. So you play that for 2, draw a card, then dispute it, draw 3 cards and make a treasure. There was basically just no other draw engine in the format that could compete with that. So every deck that needed a draw engine just automatically went to that one.
I think
hence it being banned.
I think the other thing for it as well is, I wouldn't say Pauper has notably bad mana, but it has slow mana. Any dual land that you have comes in tapped unless it's a Shimmering Grotto sort of land where you pay an extra 1 for your coloured to filter it. So generally your mana is pretty slow in getting multiple colours. So if you're a 3-colour deck, you are probably going to be running 10 to 12 tap lands. But Deadly Dispute allowed you to fix those colours. So there was a lot of green-black decks splashing red for Writhing Chrysalis. You could also splash white if you wanted to. You know, there's a lot of things that you could basically easily splash with this treasure. So it fixed a lot of mana issues as well.
And it added to affinity and like to those sort of decks.
Left material behind that was a not a relevant card type because it was an artifact.
Yeah.
So you could also sack it to another Deadly Dispute if you wanted, or it made all your affinity cards cost less, or it fixed your mana. Yeah, it basically did everything.
I think for a stat was like 11. Was it something like 11 or 14 out of 16 of the top decks in Paupergeddon were all black decks running Deadly Dispute or something? Something stupid like it was ridiculously high. But yeah, card was busted and needed to go.
And then the final card banned, which was near and dear to my heart, was Kuldotha Rebirth. Which, if people have played Pioneer, there's like a one that got played in Pioneer for a bit. Was it Gleeful Demolition or something like that? It's essentially a red for a sorcery that you sack an artifact and make 3/1/1 red goblins. It was basically the core of one of, if not the best aggro deck in the format.
Yep.
You essentially made goblins. You could sack things like Experimental Synth, which get you card advantage, or just like random blood tokens, or even the lands because it ran Great Furnace. Make these goblins, and then you could kick Goblin Bushwhacker, which is like an all-star common from Zendikar, that gives all your creatures +1/+1 haste. So it's essentially a 3 mana 8 damage swing. Off 4 bodies as well. So even if they've got a blocker, like the block one still takes 6. So it was a pretty strong engine. The red deck, to be honest, has been one of, if not the best deck in the format, or like fighting for that position for quite a long time, since Swift Spear was downshifted, really, which was it in Double Masters or something like that?
I would probably even argue even earlier, right? Like, and probably since Initiative was printed was when the deck sort of came around.
Yeah, true.
So it's probably since then.
So yeah, it's the red deck's been really good for a really long time, and the core essentially has been this Kuldotha Rebirth and Goblin Bushwhacker Power Punch. The main sticking point I have on this is I think they should have banned the Bushwhacker rather than the Rebirth.
Yeah.
Because one without the other is much less good. Like Goblin Bushwhacker, if you're like hard casting creatures, is just a fine rate. And then Kuldotha Rebirth, if you've not got this burst damage, is just a fine rate. But the uniqueness of the Kuldotha Rebirth made the decks like different to other like red decks.
Yeah.
Whereas now that the Rebirth is gone, so like that artifact sacrifice synergy is gone, all the red decks sort of just like merge more towards one thing, which is like pingers. So like Thermal Alchemist style or Keswick Flame Breathers, and just burn spells, rather than you have pinger burn and then you have like this Kuldotha aggro deck. Now you've just got sort of a mismatch of them both together.
Yeah. It did feel like Glee died for Bushwhacker's sins, because it was kind of cool. You know, you think about the 1/1 bodies sort of die to the same sort of hate that you bring to Fae and stuff. You know, give opponents' creatures -1/-1, etc. So even though like, you know, you're getting 3 bodies for the price of, I guess, essentially, well, a spell and a card, depending on how on what you're sacrificing. Because a lot of play patterns of that was you could just sacrifice your artifact land to get 3 bodies. You know, which, you know, you sacrifice a land to get 3/1/1s wasn't necessarily the most busted thing, but obviously put Bushwhacker on top of that as well, then that's sort of sent into overdrive. So I think I'm in agreement. I think Bushwhacker probably would have been, instead of killing a deck off, probably would have been better just to get rid of the explosiveness of it.
Yeah, I think that's my only sticking point on these bans. Like, I think they were all correct. Like, I think something from Red needed to go, and Dispute and Brood Scale needed to go. But I just wish the something from Red was the Bushwhacker to keep that sort of unique archetype in the format.
Yeah, I think the other thing as well is that a lot of people think, well, our Pingerburn wasn't playable before before Kuldotha got banned. But I also think at the time, with Glee being everywhere, Snuff Out was at its all-time high. It was literally in every deck needed to run it. Like Jeskai, Cleanse and Wildfire ran Air Swamp, Air Swamp for Lorien Reveal and Air Swamp for like an actual basic swamp to play Snuff Out, because it needed to compete with Glee. But Snuff Out in particular, I know it sounds silly. Snuff Out is a 3 and a black. Those that don't know, and you can, if you control the swamp, you can pay 4 life to destroy a non-black creature.
I love that card.
Uh,
It's my favourite card in Pauper, I think. Apart from maybe Spellstorm Sprite.
The big thing about that is Pingerburn. It's still like, even though I know you're losing 4 life, you still don't want, like, a pinger will deal more than 4 damage, and it generally is in your interest to kill it like that. So Pingerburn sort of died off because of that, I would say. With Glee gone, I imagine Snuff Out would have made a natural... Like, if you banned Bushwhacker and kept Kuldotha, I imagine both would have existed next to each other, as in 2 red archetypes, because Snuff Out is at an all-time low. So I think for me, like, a lot of people do say, like, that's the argument, oh, well, Pingerburn wasn't playable anyways, but I think taking into context of the format at the time was very... I need to deal with Snuff Out, a one individual creature, which Pingerburn, obviously, you don't want.
Yeah. Do you think it was enough then, the BNRs? Or do you think, so they had some unbans as well, but do you think the bans were enough? Would you have banned anything else, or do you think that was fine? Or...
I personally think it was fine. I like to err on the side of not banning too much, like just addressing the stuff that needs banned. The Dispute, I think people have been calling for it to be banned for quite a while, although it wasn't like breaking anything. It wasn't like obnoxious. It was just too ubiquitous. And then, yeah, the Brood Scale had to go, and something from Red had to go. I don't know if you think something else should have been banned as well, Teasdale.
I'm always on the of... I originally thought Writhe and Chrysalis should have went, because the rate on it is just too good. At the moment, it's probably an all-time low compared to what it was, which I think is fine, but obviously the meta hasn't been this long for a long time. I do agree. I generally am on the air of don't ban as much. But yeah, I think you probably... it depends on how you look at it. You probably could see in a few months' time, or maybe look at this, maybe look at that, all that sort of stuff. But I think generally they hit the nail on the head. They definitely targeted the right decks. And they definitely targeted the right cards. I do agree with Rhys. I think the big one is the Bushwhacker would have been my choice over Kuldotha.
I think Chrysalis as well, it's something that they'll definitely be keeping an eye on. It's not like it's got away scot-free. It's like they're aware of how ridiculous Modern Horizon rated creatures are. So it'll definitely be on the watch list.
I'm pretty sure rather than Chrysalis is now played in modern Eldrazi decks now, like ramp decks.
I wouldn't be
surprised. The rate is so good.
Yeah.
So we had some unbans too. 2 cards got unbanned. Do you want to tell me about them? How they might have affected the format? I know. We mentioned one of the namesake cards at the beginning of the pod. But yeah, just want to go over them too.
I think I'll take the first one, because I think it's something I've mentioned on the podcast multiple times. Basically, every time we have a BNR, I've said Prophetic Prism should be unbanned. It's essentially a 2-mana artifact that draws a card when it enters, and you can pay 1 and tap it and add 1 mana of any colour, so it filters mana. It was banned initially because Tron was basically getting too good, and it played 4 of them. It was also in Affinity, which was one of the better decks at the time as well, so it was like a dual hit. But as soon as they banned it, like a few sets later, they printed Energy Refractor, which is essentially just a better Prophetic Prism for the Tron decks. So the Tron decks just slotted that in and just continued on with the day. Currently, it's sort of in an interesting place. Like the results we've seen from it Affinity's just not really bothered to pick it back up. We've seen a few lists that had one in, but that was basically it. The fact that Affinity now has changed so much from what it used to be. It used to essentially be 4 colours with like a wonky mana base.
Yeah.
Now it's like a really tight 2-colour deck that's essentially splashes a 3rd colour. It's sort of getting even closer to being like completely mono black splash 2 colours.
Yeah.
With the Mon Horizons bridges as well. So just like the mana just isn't bad for it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't really need it. Tron has picked it back up again, which is interesting. It still plays 4 energy refractors. It just also plays prisms as well now.
Yeah.
Some of the lists that we were seeing last week had 4 of each in, which was quite funny. It's debatable whether Tron will be too good. Like, obviously, there's a lot of land destruction in Pauper. One of the decks that's picked up a lot of speed after the bans is Ponza, which is a green-red land destruction deck, essentially. Green-red Stone Rain deck.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a format where green-red big creatures and Stone Rains are good, Tron tends to not be very good.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of answers for Tron if it does pick up. Even like the mono red aggro decks have a 1 mana sacrifice one of your lands to destroy one of theirs sorcery. So even mono red has answers.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also Cleanse of Wildfire in the format naturally as well.
Yeah.
So the control decks also have answers. So there's a lot of answers, which is good. I know that was one of your things with Pioneer is there's a lot of questions without answers. Pauper has a lot of answers for most of the questions, which tends to keep decks in check.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's definitely a buff to Tron. I think Tron will do well, but I don't see it returning to the like domination that it had previously when Prism was initially banned.
Yeah. Hopefully not. I guess you want me to cover the last one, eh?
Yeah.
So
probably the one that had a lot of excitement around it. It's most discourse I saw anyway on Twitter and stuff.
Yeah, but as we obviously alluded to earlier with the history, it's never been legal in Magic Online. So the last card that got unbanned was High Tide, which was probably a surprise to quite a lot of people because most people think of High Tide as this probably broken combo deck.
Mm-hmm.
But on the ban list already is Cloud of Fairies, Frantic Search, and Peregrine Drake. So the only card that really untaps your lands is Snap. So that kind of alludes to the only card that like is free that you don't have to jump through hoops for. But obviously this card's never really been played in Magic Online, so they've never really had mass amounts of data how broken this card will be. So it's pretty interesting that it was obviously got lots of hype when it came out. It got the current lists have lent towards a arcane sort of deck, which uses Psychic Puppetry, which is 1 and a blue, and you can splice it onto an arcane where you reveal it as you cast an arcane, and it basically twiddles. So you tap out and tap tile permanent. And then it just runs a lot of medium spells that are also just arcanes. Like there's a Reach Through Mist, which is a 1 mana draw a card, arcane. There's a Ideas Unbound, which is 2 mana draw 3, discard 3 at the end of turn. There's a 2 mana Peer Through Depths, which is like an impulse sort of thing. And then the big one is Petals of Insight. Is that the name of the card? Which is the big one, which is a 5 mana spell. It's an arcane that you look at the top 3. You may put them at the bottom. If you put them on the bottom, you return Petals to your hand. If you don't, you draw 3 cards, but it goes to the graveyard. So effectively, once you get to enough High Tides that your lands tap for more than whatever it is, like 5 plus however many times you splice for a blow, you can basically net infinite mana by just keep bouncing it back to your hand. Return it to your hand. And you make infinite mana, and then you mill them out with Stream of Thought, which is 1 blue, mill 4, return 4 from your graveyard, and you can replicate it for 4 mana. So effectively, you just mill your opponent out. At the moment, the first challenge that we had, had 2 in the top 8 and a High Tide in 9th, with High Tide Familiars. Familiars is a combo deck that's been around for a while, and it usually is the deck that sort of peters on broken cards like Mystic Sanctuary and Cloud of Fairies and stuff like that. But yeah, generally that's sort of all we've seen. After that, there's flitters of it, it's a pretty even though it's spell based, it's very interactable.
Mm-hmm.
We have Pyroblasts, we have Red Elemental Blasts, so we have 8 blasts in the format.
Yeah.
We've got Duresses, the usual sort of stuff, and it's slow.
Counter spells.
Counter spells are in the format.
Yeah, just in
Spell Stutter Sprite is very good against High Tide.
Yeah.
It also sort of suffers from the same thing as Tron, where if you're against Ponza, like you usually need like 4 to 5 lands for High Tide to combo off.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're getting your lands blown up on turn 2, turn 3, like it slows you down even more.
It's almost like it's checking it. The format's checking itself. Like it's just this like balanced ecosystem of you can do this mad stuff, but at your peril. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
it does tend to.
Yeah, it's cool. And you know when I seen when High Tide got unbanned, like you saw Mengu all over it. I saw Brian Koval talk about it. He's massive into the legacy play. He's massive into Pauper. And you know, like I think it was reminiscent of when Splinter Twin got unbanned in Modern. Like people thinking, oh my god, Splinter Twin's back, or this card's now in the format, and you have this massive hype, and then you realised actually it's fine. Like there's no.
I think the funniest thing that I've seen with the High Tide being unbanned is all these people like Mengu, as a prime example, built a High Tide deck to run on his stream, and then like 1-5'd with it or 1-4'd with it.
Yeah.
And then someone else would play it and then 1-4 with it. I'm just like no one knew how to build it either.
Yeah.
So you're like going from stream to stream. They were all completely different builds, but they were all just 1-4.
Mine was the same.
Yeah, exactly. Teasdale built it 1-4.
So we talked a bit there about the BNRs and sort of like, you know, the bans and unbans. It was very impactful in the format. Do you just want to talk about anything else in terms of how the metagame looks right now? We did do a lot of metagame talking then. Before we sort of come on to like the sort of paper scene that's happening, particularly in the UK right now.
I think, yeah, in general, like the meta is just super diverse right now.
Mm-hmm.
You can basically play anything, and do well. Pauper is very much like if you're like know your deck really well. If you're a master of your deck, you can win in metas where it's like not the best deck.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like a pretty good example of that. Like Fair, for example, sometimes basically peters out of being non-existent, but the people who always play Fair just tend to do well, even if Fair's not well positioned.
Sound like
look at
like legends and people.
Look at Terra, for example. Terra was very bad before the ban announcements. It was poorly positioned, but you still often see Discover End at the top of challenges winning with Mono Blue Terra.
Yeah, you should know your deck, and you always play it, get the reps in.
So if anyone is wanting to like look at getting into Pauper, I would literally just look at the deck that you think's cool, rather than trying to look at what's like the highest percentage on top 8 or whatever. Like because we were at the most recent Paupergeddon, and stuff like Cycle Storm was like live for the top 8. Cornetto was playing Cycle Storm, and just because he was a master with Cycle Storm, was literally like a game away from top 8 and with this deck that's 0.1% on top 8.
And then once you pick your deck, there's lots of opportunities to play that deck. I've taken it around in Europe. You know, you've got Paupergeddon in Europe. You've got the the Booze MTG doing a lot of stuff behind for the legacy. For the Magic community, particularly around like Legacy Modern, Pauper, and then you've got obviously shout out to Pauper Dan, very close to you two lads, running the nationals and stuff in the UK. Lots of opportunity to play. You know, you've got also what's his name on Newcastle. Kieran Glasgow, shout out to that guy. I just felt that guy, the gentle giant he is. He's massive waves of Pauper over on the East Coast. So, and then you've also got Axion now, probably the biggest tournament organizer in the UK now making Pauper. I don't know what they've called it actually. I forget the name, but they got like the Mega Modern Series, Mega Pauper. I don't know, whatever it's called. But I think that'll have a good turnout. But you lads have been very sort of like active within the Northern Pauper Open, and probably since obviously it's Dan's idea, I guess, but since its inception, you guys have been on board on that train with them, help supporting them, help promoting it, etc. You've been to a couple of them, you've won a couple of them as well. So yeah, do you want to talk to me about like sort of what's happening within particularly the UK around Pauper, and why it's super exciting and why people should get on board with it?
I think the big thing is obviously first of all, like people can't shout out Pauper Dan enough. This like we say obviously about Gavin being the brainchild of the PFP. The Paupergeddon, how it started, Paupergeddon opened up to Europe, so you could be they do a LPI, the Liga Pauper Italia, where you can run a league, and it's exactly the same. You do so many matches, and then that basically qualifies you for a buy for Paupergeddon. The big difference was it's always going to feed into Paupergeddon, and Dan at the time was realizing that there's a lot of random Pauper here all over the country. The man physically drove across the country to more, I would say, majority of these places he'd heard Pauper just to go meet people. Literally went all the way up to Glasgow, like lives,
Did he come
down south to us.
Did he come to us? Did he?
Yeah, he came to us.
Yeah, I think I remember that actually. Yeah. Mental.
Yeah, because you were all surprised because you're not only seeing Dan, you're seeing me as well. So
He's came out of his bedroom. What's going on? It's like Jupiter aligned with Mercury or something. What's happening?
But yeah, so to do all that, he drove across the country to sort of get who was trying to run these things. Most places were like us, like 4 people, barely firing any events, etc. And he sort of just gathered everyone in a room and says, right, what do you want to do? Should we make a Pauper scene where everyone looks at growing a community, and then in a year we'll run a nationals event and every one of your leagues will feed it? Or do you want us all feed Pauper again? And basically everyone really agreed to just make our own, pretty much.
Yeah.
And from that point, we got the Paupergeddon community building page that they translated from Italian to English, and then everyone based it off that. Everyone in the country now runs it off the same basis.
That's class. That's awesome.
He literally had a spreadsheet telling, so you could join the Pauper UK Facebook group. They literally had a spreadsheet of where in the country you could play Pauper, what night they were on, and it was literally all down to Dan's like thing. And then obviously that then led into he wanted to run the Northern Pauper Open as his own event in Leeds. And then he reached out to us to obviously start advertising it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. We're taking some credit for the success of the Northern Pauper Open. They weren't capping out, and then we covered them and started advertising them, and then every single one has capped out since.
Yep.
That's all I'm saying.
I still need to get to one of them. Every time there's one, I'm either away with work or there's something on, and it's just really frustrating because I really want to go because it sounds like you have a right blast. Like you go and you're playing Pauper. It's like, even if I always say, like, we did a podcast a few podcasts, winning without winning kind of thing, and it's like, even if you scrub out 0-2 or 0-3 or whatever, you're there playing a format you love with like-minded people who love the format, and then you're going for beers and whatever afterwards, and there's probably going to be side events, or there's probably going to be something happening the next day, or something in the area, or community magic happens, so they're just going to fire stuff anyway. It's just something like I think most people, it's almost like the spirit of why you started the game, right? Like that's why you play the game, for that experience, and it's right there.
I think the biggest pull for the Northern Pauper Opens, they're not the most competitive. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not like Axion or whatever. The big pull for it, to be honest, as a community builder, the prize structure is like what they call pack per win. So even if you literally or 2, play the rest of them out, because if you win, you get a pack. Well, why not?
Yeah. Excellent. That's the kind of prize structure which Axion doesn't do that. I mean, Axion's very top heavy. If you're not in like the top 8, you probably get nothing. But if you get a pack per win, it incentivizes people to be there, and then it creates that atmosphere, then, doesn't it? That electric atmosphere everyone is part of.
Everyone is just there just for because they love Pauper. I think is the main thing, and it is a great run event.
It's been cool to see them grow as well, because obviously we went to the first one, which was it 20 something players, 28 players, and we've been to 4 now since then, and it's like grown to 60. Like, it capped the venue; they couldn't fit any more people in the venue, which was the old Geek Retreat that was in Leeds.
Yeah.
Now that's closed. I believe he's looking for a new venue for the next one. But yeah, they're like 64 plus players now, which is great. And then nationals as well on top of that. did we have 125 players last nationals?
Yep.
Sold 128 tickets. 125 people got there on the day. Again, capped the space that was allocated. So hopefully the one this year will be even bigger.
I need to get the date. I need to get date free for that as soon as possible. It's my mission to get to there. So anything else on this sort of pauper scene in the UK, lads, before we sort of like come to an end in this sort of pod? Because I've got a couple of questions I want to ask you before you leave.
I guess if you are interested in even trying pauper, usually I highly recommend either joining, if you're a Discord person, join the Pauper UK Discord. If you're a Facebook person, join the Pauper UK Facebook group. Or even if in doubt, just message Pauper Dan. He's on Twitter. He's probably on Blue Sky. He's on Discord. He's on Facebook. Just drop him a message. He will be able to tell you where the closest Pauper event is and what days they run.
Yeah.
I'll get links in the show notes to all those things. So Pauper UK Discord and the Facebook page. I'll put links in the show notes.
There does tend to just be pauper going on everywhere as well. Like I've been to events in Leeds, Preston, Sheffield, all the LGSs, Newcastle. Obviously we run events, so wherever you look, there's usually something going on. I know there's pauper in Nottingham that goes on quite often.
Stockport
and Sheffield,
Stockport as well.
Stockport's quite often.
I was in Manchester last weekend and I was looking at FNMs because I brought my modern decks. So I'll go play an FNM before I've got to go to my mum's 70th. And I looked at Fanboy 3. They were having sealed on, but then I think it was actually Fanboy 3 and Stockport were doing after, because it's Dragonstorm 1, it got released. After that, it was all pauper FNMs, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
I mean, I should have brought my pauper decks anyway, but you know, always have your pauper decks with you. That's what I can say.
But yeah, definitely worth looking around because it's cropping up everywhere.
I think the big thing is for me I can't say this as hard fact. It's just like my vibes. It feels like it's one of the 1v1 formats that are just F&M popping off because it's probably the cheapest format that they can get commander players to invest into. Is what it feels like to me. Like if a commander player is spending thousands of pounds on this nice shiny commander deck, they can spend 30 quid and actually play a 1v1 format that they can sort of dabble in where and when, and it's not going to massively change because it's eternal.
It's like non-committal commitment because you can be as committed as you want to the format, but you can. It's also appealing to the people who are just like, oh, go on, I'll buy a deck for 20 quid. Let's give it a go. Oh, actually, it's all right. This, and then I don't fancy playing this next week. You know, it's like it's non-committal. It appeals to so many people on the sort of Magic spectrum, doesn't it? And I think if you're into modern, especially Legacy, it requires a way more of a commitment to that format. And often enough, like it's been the case, especially when Legacy was really bad. Like those Legacy players, like they're just playing the motions because they have to play Legacy because they've got so much investment in it, not because they're actually enjoying it. But with Pauper's like one of them, it's like, you know what, if the format's bad, it's like, oh, I'll just wait till it gets better. I'm not lost anything, and then when it gets better again, I'll just play whatever I want because I can afford it.
Yeah, I think the whole like cost and lack of maintenance is just a huge factor. Like with modern should be a lack of maintenance format, but just tends not to be because it changes every time they release a Modern Horizon set, or even standard sets now they print like ridiculous pushed cards that just change the format completely. Yeah, where Pauper for the most part tends to avoid that. Yeah. And even if they do print something that does change the format, the decks, as I was saying before, if you know that deck, it can still win in like bad formats.
I mean, I looked at like Blue Black Phase, probably my favourite Pauper deck of all time, and I looked at that deck a few weeks ago. I think I even put it in the group chat. And like I was looking at the list, and my list hadn't changed. Like I was looking at what the top players, Blue Black Fey players were playing, and the list was just like carbon copy. It's like even through the Glee meta and everything, it just hadn't changed because it was just so good, you know, in with the tools that it had available. Which brings you on to a sort of closing point. Now this is a competitive podcast. We try to appease to the more competitive side of people, and Pauper is, I feel, is a competitive format. Whether you're you know, you approach it on a casual level or something, you know, you're still trying to beat your opponent. So if you guys were at the MPO or a Paupergeddon or whatever, a big tournament tomorrow, and you really wanted to win, what would be the deck you take?
Do you want to go first, Teasdale?
No, because I need to think.
For me, it'd be. I think now in this moment it would be Mono Blue Terror. Basically because I'm pretty set on where that is, both in the meta and as a list. I know it pretty well. I've done like decently with it. It hasn't really changed in this new meta because it's just basically rotated back to being good. If it was in 6 months, I'd probably be back looking at red again and deciding if the new aggro red list, whatever, mono red synth list is good enough to compete, if that's been solved yet, and where that sits. So some pretty boring answers, but for competitive sort of side of things, the mono blue terror and up until recently, like the red decks have been some of the better decks to play.
Yeah.
Can I ask, just because obviously for us, our Cast and Comment podcast looks at the micro transitions between tiny changes between one deck to the next.
Yeah.
Boomerang or Demon Inferior?
Oh.
It's a way. I feel probably like Demon Inferior. I think you're fast enough now to beat the Tron decks and the High Tide decks anyway. Like, you've got enough interaction to beat those. If Ponza becomes like a major player in the meta in the next like week or so, I would probably be back on Boomerang, just because Boomerang destroys that deck completely most of the time.
Yeah. For the most part, those that don't know, it's the difference is literally just the removal suite. Boomerang's a card that bounces a permanent for 2 blue, and Demon Inferior costs 3 to blue to bounce a non-land permanent to the top or bottom of the library, basically. And it costs less for each card they've drew.
The tempo play Boomerang's pretty spicy, though. They play like a tap land, and then you Boomerang the tap land away, and then they've got to replay that same tap land. That's a massive tempo swing, that.
It's pretty good against the Wildfire decks in particular, playing the bridges. Like, if you're on the play and they play a bridge and you've led on a Delver, you can basically just get 3 turns of Delver for free with like a Boomerang or 2.
Can you bounce your own lands? Can you bounce your own lands?
Yeah, if you want.
So if they go to destroy your land, you can just return to your land and replay it.
Yeah, and fizzle there.
Brilliant.
But yeah, against Ponza in particular, the mana ramp shell is essentially Arbor Elf untapping a forest that has Wild Growth or Utopia Sprawl or both on it. So if they're like turn 1 Arbor Elf, turn 2 Utopia Sprawl my land, and you can bounce the land, it essentially sets them back like 2-3 turns plus.
Is it still a similar shot? I know Ponza's probably not that playable in Modern, right? But that's the shell it used to be in Modern, right? It used to be an Arbor Elf, actual Stone Rain sort of shell, because it obviously had Stomping Ground, I believe. But
I feel like I've seen the Eldrazi decks play Utopia Sprawl recently.
Yeah, they probably have. I don't play enough Modern. I don't play any Modern, actually, to even know. I did redabble, to be fair, when Splinter Twin got unbanned, but
I think a lot of people did, didn't they? And then they realised, actually, this Underworld Breach card is actually horrendous. I don't want to do this anymore.
For me, I think if I was to take a deck to win, I think I'd probably just take one of the best decks, and that'd be Affinity. Grixis Affinity is just always good. You can choose it to beat whatever you want it to beat. Whatever you want. It has small changes that can beat anything in the metagame that you expect. But if it was me, because I don't often take tier 1 decks.
You're like that meme where he puts the stick in his cycle, you know, the spikes in his bicycle.
Why have I done this?
Yeah.
No, it pays off sometimes. But I think personally, I'd take Goblin Combo or Mogwarts.
Yeah.
Which is it's a deck that, if people ever have seen my channel, I absolutely love. I've took it to the Northern Pauper Open. It's a combo deck that basically relies on Skirk Prospector, which is an old card that sack a goblin out of red. And then there's a card called Putrid Goblin, which is 1 and a black for a 2/2 with Persist. And
from
you can
Modern Horizons.
From Modern Horizons. Like, you can sack it, because it is a goblin, you can sack it to add a red. You can play a card called First Air Class, which is every creature you control this turn enters with a +1/+1 counter and gains haste. It does have Learn as well, which basically lets you pull a lesson from your sideboard. But that essentially cancels the -1/-1 counter from Persist. Sort of like a Malira combo, right? That's or the Vizier. Vizier, is that the name of the white card? Vizier, yeah. And it sort of basically nets infinite red. And then you basically, with that infinite red, you either kill them with a makeshift munitions or now a dragon. But yeah, the deck's got new tools from Dragonstorm. It's got the Omens. There's a new Omen that basically is a Tormented Voice that this card draws through, and it also has a big dragon on the other side that has Fire Breathing, so you can pump infinite mana into a 4/4 flying haste. It's fun. That's what I'd take.
I think for me, I'd be like, my heart be like Blue Black Fae, but I've really Madness Burn has been really giving me the good feelings at the moment. Like I'm really enjoying that deck. Like it's just
it's
something
really picked up as well. It's really doing well.
It's the kind of deck that like it's complete like I've never played. I remember playing a standard deck years ago, which was like Vampire Madness, which was like back in Shadows over Innistrad. Before I was playing like real decks, and I really enjoyed that, and it sort of reminds me of that sort of era of my life when it came to Magic. You know, like carefree, like doing something that isn't blue, like cause even though it does have that fairy.
It's got fairies in it still.
Yeah. But you're not casting them. But, you know, it's just I don't know. It's a deck that like isn't like any other deck I'm playing right now in any other format, and that's why I really enjoy it. So I'd probably just make Madness Burn. I really like it. I like the explosiveness of it. Dome Swarm and 12 in one. It's like class.
It's one of the things that sort of stands out about Pauper in general is so many decks are so unique and you just don't see them in other formats. Like, for example, Cycle Storm, where you essentially cycle a bunch of creatures away, get them all back with a Storm spell, and then play a guy that pings for every creature cycle and cycle them all again. And then there's, like you say, there's Madness decks, there's like normal aggro decks, control decks, mid-range decks, but they've all just got like spins that you don't see in other formats, which is really cool.
Cool. So I'm sort of happy with that, lads. I don't know if you want any last closing thoughts before we move on to like you plug in your socials and shout outs and all that good stuff.
I guess one thing for me is don't also think the UK scene. I don't know how your listener spread is. Don't think the UK scene is the only scene for Pauper. It is popping off everywhere.
Yeah.
For us, we have a segment on our podcast where basically you can join our Discord and put in a section to shout out. That basically you can, literally, if you want an event shouted out, just put it in there. We will shout it out in our news segment. And literally, we're shouting out at the moment ones from Germany. We've got ones from America. We've got obviously UK events. We've had obviously the Italian events to be shouted out. We've had Czech. We've had Poles. We've had all sorts. Literally all across the world, Pauper is popping off.
Cool. Would you like to? So I'm gonna all your links and stuff. So the links to your podcast, your individual Twitter and all that good stuff. I'll get them off you. I'll put them in the show notes, including your Discord. We mentioned Pauper Dan's Facebook page, Pauper UK Discord, and all that good stuff. I'll get all them on the show notes too. So if you would like to shout out your socials now to the listeners. For anyone who's driving or forgets to like check the show notes later, then you can do that now.
So obviously check me out on Teasdale MTG, Twitter, YouTube is the same, and I'm probably Teasdale MTG on everything. I think. Check me out there, and then obviously the podcast, but I'll leave that to Rhys.
Well, I guess the podcast Discord is the main thing that we're pushing at the moment.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's called because I'm a Discord boomer, but I'm sure Josh will put a link down there for you.
I will put a link.
It's grown. Like we've only just started it. It's picking up quite fast. There's a lot of cool discussion in there, cool deck lists, like all sorts. And then listen to us on Spotify is the main platform, but I believe it's posted on Teasdale posted on YouTube as well. Rate us 5 stars because that's what we like to do on Spotify.
Also rate this on 5 stars as well.
Yeah, buddy. Sweet. Well, lads, I want to thank you for coming on. I've really enjoyed this conversation, actually. You know, it's really nice to have people who are so passionate about a format coming on because it actually is quite infectious. I really feel like I want to play some Pauper now. I'm actually going to probably go on this and like doom scroll on MTG Goldfish to see what other Pauper decks buy. I need to still bring my Pauper box round to the club to people to have a look through because I swear there's about 4 or 5 Pauper decks in there. I'm sure every time I make a card order, I'm always throwing some commons on there because it's rounds off my £200 orders on like 5 cards or whatever.
Get your Fridays in May free, and you can come and play some Pauper F&M.
Well, that's in my scopes right now. It's actually quite handy because all my busy Fridays are this month, so the next month I think my Fridays are freed up. So hopefully, yeah. So thanks, lads. Thanks for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and don't forget everyone to check Casting Comments out. check Teasdale MTG out, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Battlechads, where we talk about all competitive 1v1 stuff, and hopefully like a bit more Pauper stuff now. This has happened, but yeah. Cheers, boys, and thanks for coming on. Cheers, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.